of Strong Women, Strong Girls in our structure, what we, this would probably be helpful with the notes, but
a lot of the questions that we were going to ask you is actually about this information.
Okay.
So that's going to be very helpful.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay. That is wonderful.
and I can send you the PowerPoint with the notes, because now I'm realizing that it's not as helpful without all of the notes to explain it. So.
That would be great. Yeah, any material you think that would be helpful, we would
Yeah.
certainly
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Awesome.
We'll just make our presentation on it. So, I didn't know if it makes a little sense for us to introduce you. You know me.
Yeah.
But Jessie, Liz, I'll let you guys introduce yourself.
Sure.
I'm Jessie Weiser. I am in the special studies program at Hugley, and I'm focused on civic and moral education, mostly outside the classroom, or at least outside the traditional classroom. So that's kind of. Is there anything else that you want to know about us, or that would help you contextualize?
No, I mean, I think after we talk a little bit about yourselves, I'd love to just hear a little bit more about the class.
Yeah.
Great, we can do that.
Yeah, so I'm Liz. I'm in the Learning and Teaching program. I come from a background actually in television. I worked for ESPN for 4 years as a producer in DC and loved it, but I'm trying to sort of mix those skills back with education, which is what I'm really passionate about, so working to the ed school to help me transition. And then the class that we're taking, which is really interesting, is called Leadership in Social Change Organizations, with Karen Mapp as a professor. And this project, basically, we've been talking a lot about. The beginning of the class was understanding where we came from and understanding our privilege and how that's going to affect everyone that we work with. And then it's about building a strong organization that can withstand, a lot of the struggles of working in social change organizations, which are, probably more difficult than some of the traditional routes. So that's a little bit about it, if you guys have anything to add.
Yeah, and mostly that we're here to really understand how you guys function as a social change organization, since many of us are interested in working in that capacity. So in terms of leadership and structure and, those will be asking us the questions today. Just understanding the nuances that make you who you are as an organization and all your successes and challenges.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so we have like a set list of some questions we want to get to, but by all means, if there's something you feel like we're totally missing, like bring it up.
Yeah.
And if there's something you really want to go more into, definitely do it, because I think most important for us, is just to get sort of an organic sense of what you guys are all about and how it works on a day-to-day basis and sort of all that good stuff. So the first one we have is just, what need do you feel that the program is meeting?
Sure. So I think the biggest need is with young girls, and really building their self-esteem and opening up a world of possibilities for them. So we work with elementary school girls after school program. Our college women go in once a week for an hour and a half and work with them. And there's a lot in the news right now about how women have made these great strides, and women are attending college at higher rates than men, and the kind of fall of the man, which if you look at, while the stats are true that women are attending college at a higher rate and everything, we haven't yet seen that transition into the real world and into top level positions in politics. There's a great speaker, Emerge Boston does a lot on women in leadership, and had some stats on just women in Massachusetts in politics and how they're really underrepresented, which is, I think, pretty shocking for people in Massachusetts to see that. So for our young girls, we're trying to reach them when they're younger. What tends to happen with elementary school girls is that when they hit middle school, they experience a drop in self-esteem. The average age of entry into prostitution in the juvenile justice system is about 12 and 13. So we're trying to surround our girls with this network of supportive peers, with an opportunity to build their skills to successfully navigate through that, and then kind of achieve their dreams. We really focus on working with low-income girls. A lot of them don't have as many opportunities as other girls do. They may have limited access to role models in different fields. So really also trying to show them that they can be many different types of things, what we see with girls too is that they decide right around middle school again what they can and can't be, and start talking about that they're not good at math or they can't be a scientist, and then they stop taking courses, which then in the long run they can't become that because they haven't prepared themselves to enter that world. And so making sure that again they understand the options that are open there to them, and for the lower income girls, making sure that college is an option for them. In Boston in particular, we are working with Harvard, Northeastern, Tufts, Simmons, and UMass, and there's a lot of girls living in poverty right around those campuses that have never been on this college campus. And so our college women plan field trips, bring the girls on campus to show them, to kind of bring it to life a little bit. So that's one of the first things that we're addressing, is kind of helping girls get through these tricky times, but then also building their leadership skills. The second part of our program is around implementing a service project so the girls can see themselves as a leader in their community. So it's not that we're just preventing and getting them along, but that we're really helping to build them into change agents, and ultimately creating this community of women that are committed to positive social change. So on the college women's side, there's also challenges when you first go to college. It's hard. A lot of people, it's the first time away from home. There are a lot of new stressors there, a lot of classes, balancing everything, and just finding out where you fit in. And so, again, surrounding them with that supportive network of peers and really giving them opportunities to test out and practice their skills around leadership. So our college women do all of their own fundraising, their event planning, running meetings, skills that will really prepare them to enter the workforce, ready to be these new future leaders. And there's a ton of research on women in college and leadership, and how I have the percentages off the top of my head, but I can send them to you around that women in college don't view themselves as leaders, or don't think that they're as well prepared to be leaders, but their peers rate them just as well as men. And so there's this disconnect there that people believe that women can be leaders, but in many instances the women themselves don't believe that. So trying to break that, and so these women can really become leaders. They're of course serving in their community. If you start serving at an earlier age, the more likely you are to continue serving. And so the idea also with the college women is that we're working with them at this time where they're making some pretty big life decisions, and hopefully volunteering in the community, working toward issues of women and girls, that will inspire them to continue doing that in their future careers, whatever that may be. And the third element is around our work with the professional women. So most recently we started working with young professionals to engage them as coaches to our college women. So the same premise applies with them, that when you're moving into the workforce, it can be challenging to find a female mentor, to really build your skills to become those top leaders or the supervisors. So in Strong and Strong Girls, they're surrounded with a network of their peers that are participating in the program, so they can go to them and kind of bounce ideas off from each other. We provide them with training on coaching and providing feedback, and then they get to work with the college women and kind of test those things out. So hopefully within Strong Women, Strong Girls, in this safe setting, they're building their leadership skills, which will then allow them to move up, which goes back to my very beginning point where women are not in those top positions. So then eventually help tweak that.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about sort of sometimes the struggles of like how do you define success, and especially with things that maybe are more qualitative versus quantitative. So I was just wondering how you're sort of able to understand your success, whether it's a combination of both, or sort of how that works.
So we have a really robust performance measurement system that we've worked a lot to really hone in on. We've worked with different experts in the field, but I think that's a great question, and because you can get hard data, but it doesn't always tell the fuller picture, especially around things around self-esteem. That I think are a little bit harder to measure. But we do look at the total number of girls served. We have some hard goals that we're working toward. So number of girls served, the number of hours that our college women are serving, and then looking to see increases in skills, self-esteem, leadership, aspirations, desire to participate in service, and connection to a female community. So we're measuring, at the beginning of the year, we do a pre and a post survey with the girls, compare change over time, and then we also survey important people in their life. So we ask their parents, people at the school, if they've seen those changes. And same thing with the college women and the adult women. We kind of follow everything that we do across the street. Yeah, and but apart from that, we do use observation a lot and have worked really hard with our program staff to build what we call a story bank, which brings to life some of these stories and paints a real picture of what's happening. So an example of one of them, we talk all the time about raising college and career aspirations of girls, but at the end of the day, they're still 10 years old. So it's a little bit hard. But one of my favorite stories that we learned last year was that at the start of every lesson, the girls and the college women do a check-in, and they do peaks and valleys, roses and thorns. And they were this time talking about Halloween, because it was right before Halloween, and one of the girls said, well, I was going to be a witch, but I decided now I'm going to be Bessie Coleman. And Bessie Coleman is the first African-American female pilot from the early 1900s.
Wow.
Not initially that cool to a 10-year-old, but her mentors did such a great job of bringing to life this woman that the girl dressed up as her for Halloween. And then the next step, which I think is even more important, continued to come in every week and talk about, here's one thing I learned about becoming a pilot, or here's one other thing I learned about Bessie Coleman. So it didn't stop at, oh, I want to be her, but she continued to kind of research those different options, which I think brings to life some of the things that we're trying to do.
And probably like explaining that to other kids, like teaching
Right,
other
exactly.
kids about it.
Yeah,
I'm sure they'd
right.
be like, what are you?
Yeah. And right, exactly, having the confidence to
to talk about it.
So we're also wondering, I mean, I think we're going to try and talk to Lindsay a little bit about this as well, so I'm sure we'll probably get some more of like the history of the program, but also just sort of like how it's evolved and where it's sort of going.
Sure. So you all know, started at Harvard. Lindsay started the organization when she went there and really noticed there was a lack of opportunity for college women to get involved in mentoring programs. At the time, a lot of the mentoring programs didn't accept college students as mentors because they, in the past, had done research and had shown that there was less commitment there. And so it was better for the youth to find other people who were located in the community and weren't as transient. So Lindsay wanted to change that. She didn't believe that that was true, and so started Strong and Strong Girls, and really were focused in Boston, and then expanded within the area. And then a lot of our growth, we've kind of talk a lot about the difference between growing in depth and breadth and the number of people we serve. And so serving more girls has always been one of our key goals. So we expanded to Pittsburgh in 2007, and then in 2009 expanded to Miami. And when we expanded in each of those cities, it was a little bit of seizing an opportunity. People actually came to us and said, we want to bring you to Pittsburgh. One of our board members actually was a professor at Carnegie Mellon, and so wanted to champion bringing us there. And then a funder in Miami who had worked with Lindsay while she was in high school wanted to fund us to go back there. So we had some strong connections there, but also looked into the research. And at the time, Pittsburgh was ranked, I believe, 49 out of 50 in gender equality. And Florida, or Miami, the rates of volunteerism, they were 50th at the time. So, and after-school program is just not as structured down there. So it made, the need was there, and we had the financial and other support to grow there, which made sense for us to work toward that goal of expanding the number. The other, now what we're looking at though is, how do we reach more girls more efficiently? So it takes a lot of resources to open up an office, which I'm sure you can imagine. I moved down to Miami for 6 months to get that up and running, and then Lindsay was going back and forth, and now we finally have a staff that's up and running, but just the amount of time to get that running is a lot. So we're looking at a couple of different things. One, does it make sense for us to expand regionally? So have hubs start from Boston, go out to Worcester, go to Providence, and expand that way, which would be a little bit easier to manage than I think first we were like, yeah, we're going to go everywhere. And so now we're thinking a little bit more strategically about that. But the other really cool piece that we're looking at is how can we provide the program more remotely. So we're looking at, we're calling it Powered By, and having tiered levels of support where somebody in the community could come to us and say, we want to bring Strong and Strong Girls to our community, and we would provide them with the curriculum, the training, the ongoing support to do that, which will allow us to serve more rural areas because, of course, it's also not, apart from the time it takes to open up an office, there's no way our model works in rural communities because there's not as many colleges, the number of girls that are there. So this would allow like a Boys and Girls Club or a community center or even a mother to come forward and say, I want to bring this to the community. So we're exploring that option right now and what that would look like and having kind of a virtual support system. So I think that's on the horizon. And the other piece around depth, we're always looking at how do we provide better programming. And so when we initially started off, we were focused around building the skills, and so the first part of the program, each week they're practicing a skill, and then the second half of the program they're doing a service project. We've continued to kind of follow the research, and one of the things that's really come up is that girls of color and low-income girls of color in particular, obesity is on the rise, a huge epidemic. So we've built in the past 2 years, a Get Active component of our curriculum, which in the beginning, they get a healthy snack from their mentors and they talk about what makes it healthy, and then they do a little Get Active moving piece that to learn about the skills. So good communication, they may play Simon Says, and then they talk about kind of how does that game demonstrate good communication, or they may do follow the leader or charades, and then they talk about body language. So trying to build in these pieces where they're up and moving, and if they do 2 of the Get Active pieces a day, they're doing 30 minutes of physical activity, which they're closer to reaching that 60-minute goal. So that's one of the pieces that we've been looking at, and with the physical activity piece, particularly with girls, if they see that their mentor's doing it and are doing it with other girls in their group, it's a lot easier for them to internalize that and make it a part of their ongoing life and their day-to-day habits. So that's one of the pieces that we're looking at. There's also some interesting research in Pittsburgh. Progress has been looking a lot about the issue of women in politics, women in negotiation, and that women in their first job don't negotiate their salary, which then over the long term puts them off on, they're earning less over time, and how that impacts poverty and things like that. So one of the things that we did is work with them and build in some enrichment activities to really talk to girls about how negotiation is just part of your everyday life. And if you want to go to your friend's house but your parents want you to study, how can you negotiate with your parents to do that? So again, the idea is, I think negotiation sounds like such a scary thing, but when you think about it, you do it all the time. So showing the girls that, no, this is part of your everyday life, and you can do it, and you're already doing it. So that's kind of, I think, the piece on where we're going on the breadth side is just looking, or the depth side is looking at what does the current research say, and how can we adapt that, and we're working on the service projects to make sure that those are a little bit more impactful as well, and that's something that on our side we're constantly evaluating, and the service piece has been historically one of the lower outcome areas, and so we're really excited to be working to try to improve that.
Yeah. So just talking a little bit about the Pittsburgh and Florida state, South Florida states, because we thought that was really interesting. Now I understand where they came from.
Right.
But sort of what's the relationship between all the sites, and then is there shared information, resources, and I guess also just what do you feel, or what does the organization feel that needs to remain consistent, and what can sort of be flexible?
Sure. So the structure of the organization, 3 years ago, we worked with the root cause to just analyze how we were structured. and were we providing the right level of support to the different cities, and did an entire restructuring of the organization. So right now, and as always, we've always been one 501c3. So everything is reporting here. We have one big combined, they have their local budgets, but everything rolls into one. Nationally, we create all of our curriculum and then distribute that out. We handle a lot of the operations in our office, processing checks, our audit, things like that. And then on the program side, we do all of the standard pieces. So curriculum, training, we create standard trainings that they'll use with their mentors to make sure they're adequately prepared. And we have some kind of key benchmarks that research shows that you need to have a quality program. And then on a local level, they administer the actual program and materials that we provide, do evaluation, and send the information back up to us. We analyze all of that and kind of coach them on, okay, well, here's how you can adapt a program. So one of the things that we've changed in the last couple of years is that each city used to be that they had a program, one or two program staff and an executive director, and the program staff reported directly to the executive director. There's a org chart in here somewhere, which isn't, so originally, yes, page 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, well, actually, let me step back. So we have the National Board of Directors, which oversees the entire organization, and then our president, which was Lindsay, and now we're currently searching for a new president, but they oversee the entire organization. And from there, this is where we really started to build out our headquarters office. In the past, it was just me and Lindsay. We've added a director of development who's really looking at national fundraising opportunities or corporate sponsors, which will allow us to reach our goals of growth. But the biggest changes that we see, so this dotted line with the program managers and the executive directors used to be a straight line, and that they reported to executive directors. And then we had a director of program operations who just provided support and coaching to the program managers to make sure they were implementing things correctly.
The national, that's
Yes,
on the national.
yep. And now we've kind of changed those roles around, and that the local program staff report directly to the national director of programs. So that's a solid line,
okay.
and there's
Got
the
it.
dotted line with the EDs. And the idea there is that we saw a lot of challenges with the executive director role in finding a person who could do that role with fundraising, strategic planning, and be an expert in program. It's just a full plate.
Yeah.
And so for that person, it was a struggle. And then also for program quality, we were losing out on a lot of information because people were reporting to individual people versus now coming into the national director of programs, which is me. I can gather best practices that are happening on a local level and then feed them back out. And so we're just able, I think, to capitalize a lot more on things that are going well and even on challenges. We can be preventative because I can say, oh, well, I know that Boston's having this issue, so in Pittsburgh you should kind of be on the lookout for this. So I think it allows us to stay a little bit more innovative too, to see what's going on the ground, to provide better programmatic support because we have somebody in that role who knows youth development, girl development. That said, it's been a little bit of a challenge because we, in the past, hadn't been able to fully operationalize that. So the national director program had been a part-time role, which was just right now we have 6 program staff, so to be supporting or managing those staff and developing materials and monitoring.
More than a full-time job.
Yeah. So we just this September though made it a full-time role. So we're still in transition and kind of figuring that out. So I think it'll take a little while because the executive directors were providing that support. So I think it'll take some time to just change habits and to get people in the role of supporting that way or reporting that way.
So we're going to do a little bit more of like personal stuff.
Yeah.
Just because we're interested about you and sort of how did you come to this work and
Sure.
what was your background?
So I got my undergraduate degree in American Studies and Women's Studies. I originally went in for engineering, and it just, I took an a women's studies course, and it was just so much more interesting and challenging in a different way. And so decided to switch and started learning. I'm originally from Vermont, so grew up in a pretty homogenous community, working class, and so it was just really interesting to be an American Studies and Women's Studies major and learn about all these different social challenges and inequalities, and really felt the call to kind of give back and get more involved in that sector. And so I did 2 years of AmeriCorps and then came back to graduate school for sustainable international development. So originally I wanted to do international work. My graduate program, the first year was in class, the second year was a full-time practicum. So I was in Colombia for 6 months. There was a hurricane, the project never got off the ground. I ended up coming back to the United States and actually finishing my thesis with Strong Women, Strong Girls, so that's what brought me here. Yeah. But it also, just being there made me realize that I wasn't ready to move to another country and really live there, that I wanted to be closer to my family. I also started thinking a lot about the challenges that were in the United States, and so kind of shifted, I think, from international to national, and then at Strong Women, Strong Girls have just had a ton of opportunity here. We've grown almost double in size every single year, and I was fortunate enough to come on in 2006 when we had only been incorporated for a year and a half. So I've been able to grow the organization. I started off as a full-time intern, moved into a Boston program manager role, moved into a director of program operations, creating some of our different tools, our curriculum. Was able to move down to Miami to open up that office. Which is nice because it was in January and I left right in July when it was starting to get down there. So that was just a really cool opportunity, and then this past year worked on the operations side, so got to look a little bit more into finances, processes, which is really interesting, and now I'm back on the program side.
So we're wondering if there's like one story maybe from your time working here that sort of epitomizes what it's like to be here and what it's like to be part of this organization.
Wow.
Sort of puts you on the spot. It's a hard one.
I know. We liked your Halloween.
Yeah.
One story that I don't know if it entirely encapsulates everything, but that jumps out at me is when I was in Florida, working to get that office up and running and to get our chapters up, I was working with this one chapter. Our population in Florida, we partner with more state schools, and one school that is a community college, and so just get a different population of women. A lot of our women down there have families, are working full-time and going to school full-time, and just bring different experiences and skill sets to the organization. So it was, I think, at first a challenge to kind of get people on board and to get them following through on pieces. And there was this one woman who, one of our student leaders, who just wasn't following through on meetings, would come late, wouldn't do what she said she was going to do. And at first I struggled a lot with, well, she has different life experiences and hasn't had the opportunity to fully develop these skills, so how much should I push her and how much should I give her leeway? And at the end of the day, ended up saying, no, she, as long as we provide her with support, should be able to achieve these things, and I wanted to keep high expectations for her. And so it was just a really tough time working with her, and eventually had a conversation with her where she ended up stepping down from her role and was so upset about it, and really upset with me that she didn't think I was being fair and that I was treating her differently than the other student leader, and so I felt, it's always hard to hear. I didn't think I was doing it, but it's always hard to hear that. And then a year later I got this email from her that was like, I just wanted to first apologize for how I acted during this time. It was a really tough time, and I want to thank you for really pushing me and holding me accountable, and talked about what she had gone on to do, and she was working in a nonprofit. And so I think the reason I tell that story is because I think the work that we do is sometimes really hard and can feel really personal. And it's just so important to kind of take that step back and be able to think about in the long term. And she's doing great now, and in the moment it seemed like a really hard thing to do, to tell a volunteer that you can't volunteer with us anymore. But in the end it was, she came back, and so I think the story of kind of pushing and challenging yourself, and then being willing to learn and be reflective, and so the fact that we talk about that all the time, thinking about where you're at now, how could you have done things differently, what are you doing well, and so I think the fact that she was able to come back a year later and say, here's where I am, is also a great.
Seems that's a similar sort of approach what you take with your own child that
Right.
you're serving, and
Right.
pushing them to,
Yeah.
be better, be accountable for their lives.
Right.
So it seems like it's all part,
Mhm.
part and parcel of,
Yeah.
of what you guys do.
And I have a ton of stories. We have some at our Northeastern chapter. 2 years ago, we were really looking at how do we serve girls more efficiently. So there's all these women on campus that want to volunteer, and there's all these girls in the city that need services. So really push Northeastern to grow to serve more women, which was really scary at first, to go from engaging 30 women to now I think they're close to 70 women.
Wow.
And at first they're like, well, I don't know, and we worked through with them, okay, well, what are the challenges that you foresee, what's the cultural pieces or the experience of Strong and Strong Girls that you want to make sure that you keep, and brainstorm different solutions, and they ended up growing, and now they're serving, like I said, they're engaging up close to 70 women, and so I think that story, it speaks to how we do things. I think we talk about communities of women and working together, and that story, like, we sat down with the college women and came up with a great plan that actually allowed this to happen. At first everyone was like, there's no way that we're going to be able to engage that many women and have a strong culture, have a good connection, have quality mentoring, but we're able to sit down and kind of work through things, and I think it also shows the talent of our college women. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's sort of interesting. So one aspect of the class, I feel like when you were telling that story about the volunteer who you had to tell to leave, was we had to sort of write personal cases about struggles that we've had with leadership, and then
Yeah.
come back and analyze them with the theory that we've been learning in class. And I feel like half of us are probably calling our former bosses or people.
Right.
I'm not your mom, but maybe I was right.
Yeah, we're that girl.
Yeah.
We're that
But
woman.
it's been like, it's one of those things, it's really refreshing to hear that, like, reflection is a big part of it, because I think that's something that's really been hammered into us in class, that, like, it's a really important part that people just don't budget time for, or don't
Right.
take seriously. They might say, oh, it's reflection time, but they
Right.
don't actually sit there and engage with the issues. So it was, I guess, maybe on personal
Great point.
reflection, yeah. We're just sort of wondering maybe what keeps you up at night, like, what are the lingering things that keep you nagging?
Sure. So I think on a couple of different levels, I think for our staff, do they have enough support, and do they feel, are they feeling burned out? I know that we ask a lot of our staff, and so I just want them to feel supported, and we have this new structure, which I know has been a little bit of, there's been a little confusion on who do they go to on different things, so really making sure that they feel supported, and then that are there ways that we can serve the girls better and kind of be meeting their needs a little bit more. Are we missing some things?
Just a few
On a practical level, last night I was thinking about our audit, and do we have
Oh,
all of our
yeah.
all of our documentation? Have we been actually implementing the processes that we say we have been?
Yeah.
So what's your favorite thing about working here? It's probably hard to narrow it down to one, but.
Yeah. I really like the collaborative kind of teamwork atmosphere and the push toward innovation and thinking creatively. So I think that our staff does a really good job of being supportive, and if I want to brainstorm around something, everyone's excited to do that, and being challenged to think more creatively and to find solutions. Lindsay is very big when we would have a challenge, and I would say, well, I don't know, this just feeling. She's like, no, that's not a good enough answer. Like, come up with a different solution. And in the moment, I think that can be really frustrating. But in the long term, I really appreciate that focus on how do we, there's an answer to everything, so how do we find it? And people are just, it's great to be in an all-women's organization and to have that support from people.
So we're just, it's interesting that you talk about it, and I know sort of the structure here is probably pretty small, where it's, you know, not a ton of people, you're not having like huge, but is that something like, that, what are you trying to sort of create across all the offices, like similar environment and like the aspects of collaboration and innovation? Or?
Yeah, so I think collaboration, reflection and learning, or continued learning, and troubleshooting. So I think one of the issues is that we have, in some areas we have a ton of materials, a ton of guides, a ton of research, and then in other areas we don't have as much, and so I think that can sometimes be challenging for somebody to walk into an organization where some things are very structured and some things are not. And so in the local offices, kind of helping people figure out what resources are there, and and this is something that we struggle with, is when on a local level do you just go ahead and make changes, and what's the balance between standardization and localization, and we talk a lot about that. And I didn't answer, you asked this before, and I'm realizing I didn't answer this entirely. But that is definitely a huge tension, or not tension, but just something that we think a lot about. And so, but I think it's something that you experience as an individual. There's always, the way that I've kind of been trying to think about it now is that you're always going to encounter something that you would do differently personally.
Yeah.
And so, can you still get at the same end goal with that? And that's what I've been trying to figure out now when working with the program managers as they're coming up with different ideas. Maybe I would do it differently, but does it get to the same end goal? And then what are the key components that we need to have? And to give you an example, we traditionally do a strong award closing at the end of the academic year to thank all of our volunteers for participating in the program. And actually two of our cities are talking about doing it at the end of the summer, and for a couple of different reasons. It's easier logistically for them as a staff to plan it when it's not right at the end of the year. I think that it makes more sense to do it at the end of the academic year, because you have all of the college women right here.
Right.
People may graduate and not be here at the end of the summer. And I was talking to Kathy, our interim president, about it, and she's like, well, I mean, at the end of the day, what is the goal of the award ceremony? And I was like, well, it's to celebrate our volunteers and make sure they feel appreciated. And so I've been looking at it as long as they can make sure that our volunteers are thanked, celebrated, appreciated, then it doesn't really matter
what happens.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, I think that's been a challenge for me to kind of think about.
So we're just sort of curious. Sometimes I think I've been looking at a lot of organizations, especially ones with a lot of volunteers. Sometimes it can be hard to build a sense of community when some of it's transient and people are changing. And so we're just sort of wondering, maybe even across sites and in the field, sort of how you're able to do that as an organization.
So I think that one of the first pieces is just around our brand. It sounds silly, but we do have some core elements that look the same or feel the same no matter what city you're in. So I guess that would also be a thing that we would want on a local level. So we've been really intentional. We have a whole training guide on the brand, which includes look and feel. So we talk about pink and black, which are our colors. So everyone has, when they see pink and black, they know that's Strong Women, Strong Girls. We talk about at different events, having music, balloons, things that kind of make this fun atmosphere. And that, I think, no matter what city you go to, you're going to get those core elements, so you feel connected to an organization. And we've had new staff join our team in Florida, actually, and she went to one of her meetings with the college students, and they're like, you don't have pink and black on. You're not from Strong and Strong Girls. Like that. So it sounds silly, but walking into a room and having everyone in the same colors does create a sense of community. And then on the feel side, this positive atmosphere, so even just the physical things of the music, the balloons, we're really clear about what our core values are. And we talk about that at training, and so people kind of understand what the organization is all about. And we have a cheer that we teach all of the girls. So no matter where you are, you could walk into a elementary school and do the cheer, and the girls would know it. So I think having some of those core standard pieces, the curriculum, the lesson follows the same structure every single day. Some of those pieces really help to create that. And then one of the things that we've been thinking about on a national level is that our girls are really connected at their sites. Our college women are really connected on their college campuses because they are a club, they meet every week. But how do we make that connection across chapters, and how do we make that connection to the organization even stronger? So we've been much more intentional about, at any big event, talking about us as a national organization and sharing successes across the organization, across chapters, encouraging informal networking opportunities or events between our chapters. With our staff, we use Skype and WebEx, the video cam, just so you can have that
Visual
person.
connection.
Yeah.
It didn't work for us, unfortunately.
Usually. So I think those pieces, kind of having this clear sense of what we want it to feel like, and then also having that in writing and training people on it is the next, because you can have what you want it to be like, but if you don't communicate that out, you're never going to have that culture.
Yeah.
And so I think that those have been things that have been really helpful. And then sharing, we're huge about pictures and videos, and so sharing those across the network. We have a blog, our national Facebook page that everyone posts on, so you're seeing information about every city on Facebook, on the blog.
I'm just sort of curious, we talked a lot about lots of good stuff, and we all obviously love the organization, but just curious about maybe some of the challenges that you've encountered as a national leader, and also just maybe that the organization has encountered.
Okay. So I think right now the thing that have been struggling most with is that the structure of our organization, how it's set up now, really, or how it's been operating, I think needs a president to kind of make some tough decisions of where we're at and where we're going in the future, and we don't have that right now. And so that, as a national organization, has been really challenging, and we worked really hard to build this strong national office. And then when Lindsay went back to business school, we had people were kind of like, well, wait, can you make that decision? Can you make that decision? And so there are a lot of questions up in the air, and I think we had brought on intentionally really strong executive directors in each of the local cities, and encouraged them to have ownership over their cities, which they've done, which is awesome. But it's hard in a national role to be like, okay, wait, let's come back a couple of steps and talk about, is this aligned with what we're doing nationally? And so I think walking that balance of standards and local needs, and doing that without a clear president, because I think we're a pretty flat, small organization. So who has that final say? At the end of the day, if you just don't agree, who makes that call. So I think that's one of the pieces has been the biggest challenge lately as an organization. And then just thinking about how we do want, I think we're on kind of the cusp of like the next stage of the organization.
Like the virtual
Right.
experience. Yeah.
And so is that going to happen? And what
Yeah.
we've also been talking a lot about the work that we do with our adult women and what that looks like, because that's really an entirely other program that we would need to manage one-on-one matches and to do that really well, to put some pretty big investment in there. So do we want to do that, the Powered by model? I think there's some big questions that we're thinking about that in the absence of, we just got an entirely new board on, in the absence of a president, those kind of bigger questions have been a little bit challenging.
Like before you can take the next step, you have to
Right.
figure out what your internal situation is.
Right.
So when Lindsay decided to go to business school, was there an immediate, we need to search for a new president, or was it sort of like we'll fill the roles until we find someone who's perfect for us, or is there continuing search?
Yeah, so the original plan, she announced in, I believe, November, and then finished. So we did create a succession plan. So she announced in November, and then we had a plan she didn't even have a position description because she was the founder and everything had developed organically, and so take the time between November and December to really hone in on what we wanted that role to be, to find a search committee and a search firm, and then in January started looking. And so our original plan was to have somebody on in the April-May time period and who would have some overlap with Lindsay so that they would get trained and all of that. We didn't end up finding the right person, and Lindsay was done and went to Europe, which I think is great for her to kind of to get away, and I think it was actually great for the organization too to have that time to build some separation in, because I think when founders leave it can be really challenging. So I applaud her on that, because I think it must have been so hard. So in that time though, we did talk about how can we fill some of these gaps, and so we did fill the day-to-day pieces that she had been doing, but some of the bigger strategic work we haven't filled yet. And we had an interim president who, our board chair was exiting out at the same time.
Oh, wow.
And so
That's a lot.
Yeah.
and our interim president is now our current board chair. So there was just a lot of and so now though we do have another interim president who's been amazing, and she's been great just to come in with fresh eyes and looking at the organization and how we can do things differently, and have hired a new search committee and are moving forward with it, and hopefully we'll have somebody in at the beginning of the year. But that was a big struggle for us when we got down, and this is all the time, no matter the president or program manager, thinking about, do we just fill the role, or
or do you wait for someone who you really feel like is going to be
and in such a small, I mean, that sounds like a silly decision, but in such a small organization, having one position open is a lot of work, but then also putting the wrong person in that wrong position. And so we've talked a lot about that, and at the end of the day, we've come down to it's better to wait and get the right person than just to fill that role.
That's hard.
Yeah, that is a big decision to make.
And I think it's been, ultimately I think it's been great to have interims because it's forced people in some ways to step up and to really own their different lines, or and so not, I think there's been some challenges in just figuring out the decision-making process and everything, but I do think in the end it's been great for people to say, okay, I'm the executive director of this city and I'm going to own it. Or for me in program to say, okay, I'm running program, so I get to make these decisions. So it's forced people, I think, to do that.
So when you did have big decisions to make over the past, 6 months, did you end up just trying to come to some form of a consensus, like just beating it until someone all decided?
We did talk a lot. There's certain things that we've talked a lot about. Some of them we've come to a decision around, others are still
up in the air.
up in the air. particularly the piece about how are we engaging the Strong Leaders program, which are the coaches. What's going to happen to that? It's kind of up in the air, and with that, we had already laid the groundwork, and the ball was already rolling, so we had to move forward with it this year, and now we're kind of assessing what makes sense.
How do you see then the role of Lindsay or the interim president? Do you see more as a coach or as somebody that comes in and makes just tough decisions?
Yeah.
Like what is that? Well, and maybe Liz, sorry, you
No,
were getting to that.
I think that's interesting, and I think part of the reason why we didn't hire a president back in April or May was that we weren't entirely clear on that. We were thinking about, do we want somebody to come in who's really focused on operations and who can get us running smoothly and efficiently? As we've grown, we've focused on the girls, focused on the college women, and now we're at that point where we're really focusing internally. And so, and Lindsay and I, this is all we've done, and so it's helpful, I think, to have somebody come in with outside experience to look at how things are operating. So that's what's been great about the interim role, is that she's been able to look at it, at operations on it with a fresh eye. But I think the challenge with that is that means that our current line of development is will continue going down that same path, making sure things are efficient. Our growth strategy would probably still be to open up new offices, I would imagine, versus getting a more big picture strategic person who can garner support and kind of really make these tough calls. And so we've been going, I don't have an easy or like a one but that's something that we've been thinking a lot about, and what do we, because those are two different people. Somebody who can make the organization
it's hard to find that all in one
right.
person.
So I don't know.
It's a tough question.
I think it would be great to have somebody who that does have some strong vision, but also is able to delegate and coach people in their roles, because I think that really speaks to us as an organization.
Yeah.
When we think about social change and building communities of women, empowering our staff to really make those decisions and spreading out the power. I mean, that's what we talk about doing externally.
Exactly.
So I think that would be great if we could do that internally.
Okay. And then in terms of, probably one sneaky last question.
Get it right in there.
Before you got it. We're just sort of curious about the funding and how funds are distributed amongst the sites.
Yep.
And I guess also if you're gearing up for this virtual potential expansion, sort of.
How does that work?
How does that work?
That's a great question, and we're grappling with that right now. So right now, all of the local cities have their own budgets. And what we just decided to move to now is that we have our headquarters budget that hosts a lot of the administrative costs. So the costs of running our website, our annual appeal, our insurance, anything that can blanket support the organization, we've put that in our headquarters budget. Our headquarters staff, who really exist to support the local cities, have the headquarters budget, and then so we total that all up, and then at the bottom line, allocate that total out to the cities. So each of the cities have another line item that says headquarters support, that is a portion of our expenses. And then on the revenue side, we're still kind of talking about how we distribute that. I mean, at the end of the day, everything is coming into one account. And I think that has been tricky to think about the Power by model and how we move forward. We haven't had a headquarters revenue stream yet, and so that's why the Director of Development and Communications was added. She's working right now on getting some more national sponsors, which would allow us to do the Power by model, because we can't justify billing that out to local cities when it doesn't benefit them. If we're looking to go, for instance, we provided support to a college in Israel in the past 2 years, but it doesn't make sense to bill that to our local cities because it's not benefiting them in any way. And so we're trying to build up that budget that we can do this, or if we have other ideas that we want to be able to take advantage of, we have this kind of slush fund or headquarters money that we can use for that.
Did we miss anything big that you feel like burning thing that we didn't get to?
No, I think those are.
Good. Well, I mean, 2 more hours. That was great.
Yeah,
That was
thank you so
amazing.
much.
Yeah, and
Wow.
if you know, after you talk to Amy or Mickey, and you're like, oh, I wish that we would have
forgot
done. I think
about
it'll
this.
be really interesting to get Amy and Mickey's perspective on it, because on a local level. So that's kind
Yeah.
of my perspective
Yeah.
on a national level. And they may come back and be like, that's not. So I think that'll just be an interesting comparison
Yeah.
for you
Yeah.
as you're thinking about organizational change and instruction and things like that. So if anything comes out from that, let me know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I wonder what she thinks about that.
So thank you so
Definitely.
much for all your
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, thank you.
And, you know, we can chat about this at a later time. I know you're probably getting ready for the audit. So, you know, if there's anything that we can do
Yeah.
to support you guys in your offerings to your students, you know, just as a way for us to say thank you, or, you know, we'll be going to the sites eventually ourselves.
Yeah.
Jesse, I don't know if you want to talk more a little bit about this, because you're going to mention it later. So.
No, I just, you know, we all are really grateful that this whole staff is giving us so much time. So I think that if there are ways that we can contribute to one of the programs or just kind of be supportive, we'd love to do that.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
please.
let me, I'll,
Yeah,
I mean, Mickey and Amy really
Yeah.
are, you know, running everything here, but I'm sure
Yeah, and we'll
there's
mention
lots
that.
of-
Yeah.
I mean, even just thinking on the Harvard campus, they're great about bringing in guest speakers. So even if there's and they're talking all the time about social change and leadership and things like that.
Yeah.
So and Mickey works with them, so she would be able to say that might be an easy kind of, or easier,
Yeah.
interesting thing, and it would allow you to kind of get perspective too from the college women as well.
Yeah, that would be
Sure.
great.
But,
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
yeah. So we'll touch base with her,
okay,
Yeah.
but, you know, if it's on their mind as well, it's good.
sounds good. Great.
Thank
you
you.
so much.
And I'll send. Are you meeting with Amy right now?
I think,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Amy.
we're going to
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
I think I should stop this.